In May 2025, the Rotary Club of Sunrise, Florida, co-hosted with the LifePoint Church a community health seminar. The LifePoint Church co-hosted this event because to them, this is a ministry, as the core belief of the Judeo-Christian tradition is that we should love our neighbors as ourselves, even those neighbors who are different from us, even those neighbors who are difficult to love. And the LifePoint Church is a welcoming church, open to everyone in the community, and among their parishioners are several who are autistic. Now, there is no question that sometimes autistic children can be very disruptive, even occasionally lashing out, when they're exposed to overly stimulating sensory environments. And that includes an enthusiastic church service. Now, many of us instinctively believe that we should exercise self-discipline, but this is difficult for those autistic people who perceive even an ordinary day outside the house as a bright kaleidoscopic vista with the perceived blaring of a rock concert. And there are serious debates between physicians and the high-functioning autistic individuals as to whether autism, and particularly high-functioning autism or Asperger's, is a type of personality rather than a medical condition. And this philosophy implies that we should show love and compassion towards the autistic. And this also implies that there will never be a cure for autism, and that we should instead explore ways in which the high-functioning autistic person can better fit into our society, and ways in which we can encourage the lower-functioning autistic person who has severe language and social difficulties to live a better life. Our next speaker is going to be Inez Diaz. And Inez Diaz is an experienced clinical social worker and certified addiction professional with over 40 years in the field. And her work focuses on individuals with complex health and addiction issues. She's a committed advocate for disability inclusion, and she's worked towards systematic changes for better inclusivity.
Hi, everybody. It's actually Irie, like Irene without the N-E at the end, but everybody gets my name wrong. I'm used to it. I'm the CEO for the Advocacy Network on Disabilities, and we don't have a walk. But we do have a breakfast for champions. Every year at the breakfast, when I hear what they have accomplished, it's like, wow, I haven't done that. And I don't identify as having a developmental disability. So we've been around for 52 years in Miami. We've been around in Broward for about 20. We work at the micro level, which is directly with families. We work with programs and employers and institutions, helping them include people with disabilities in their programming. And then we work at the macro level, trying to impact people that make policy decisions so that people with disabilities are included in every aspect and they can contribute to our life. We serve not just people with autism, we serve people with developmental and intellectual disabilities, and we serve people with other disabilities as well. We use what's the federal definition of developmental disability. So that means any disability that was identified before age 22, it's included in the services that we provide. You don't have to have a diagnosis. You can just suspect it, and we might help you. Sometimes a diagnosis is necessary, sometimes it's not. We can just focus on what's going on and help you through that. I'm going to talk a little bit about the umbrella, and recently autism has been in the news a lot. Last month was Autism Acceptance Month. We're still in that transition where some people are calling it autism awareness, some people are calling it autism acceptance. The people with autism that are advocates for disability and for autism prefer the term autism acceptance because we don't need to be aware. We all know autism exists. We just need to accept that it's part of daily life, and how do we all work together so that we can all participate. There's a lot of talk about there's an epidemic of autism, like everybody has autism now. And the statistics do show that. In the year 2000, according to the CDC, 1 in 150 children was diagnosed with autism. This year, it's 1 in 31. The people in the field do not believe that there's more people with autism today than there were in the year 2000 or in the 1940s when we first started talking about autism. What's happened is that we have made the umbrella bigger, so more people fit under that umbrella than it used to be. Up until the 60s, it was really part of schizophrenia. And that's how it was considered. There was a guy, you've all heard of Asperger's. So there was a guy that worked with the Nazis in Germany whose job was to separate the people with, and which is why they call it Asperger's, that was his name, to separate the people with autism that he thought was worthy of continuing to live because they didn't have an intellectual disability, and those were autisms that were killed because we didn't want them around because they couldn't contribute to society. And so that's why it's become kind of a controversial term, the term Asperger's. It wasn't until the 1980s that autism was incorporated into the diagnostic manual separate from schizophrenia. It wasn't until the 1990s that they included Asperger's with autism as a separate diagnosis. And it wasn't until 2013 that that umbrella was introduced to the diagnostic manual. So when you think about the history, it makes sense that we have a lot more people today identifying as autism as before. There's a whole umbrella of disorders. One of them is processing disorders. The theory really is that all of our brains work differently. And because they work differently, they process information different, and we approach the world differently. With autism, the autism advocates are really opposed to finding a cure for autism. The tendency tends to be, how do we work together to accept the differences and accept that people whose brains function differently can contribute differently, but not less than the rest of us. And that is really what we are looking at. So I'm going to go through some of the symptoms, and some of at the end, we'll look at the spectrum. And the reason we call it a spectrum, a lot of people, when they think of spectrum, they think of a linear spectrum of here are the people that are really low functioning, and here are the people that are high functioning. In the field, we really tend to think of people who need more support and people who need less supports. And that's a more humane way of looking at it, and a more inclusive way, because what we're shooting for is inclusion. So there's the communication and social interaction part that most people are familiar with. The lack of eye contact, and unusual language sometimes, difficulty in understanding and responding to social cues, repetitive speech and really talking about the same thing, and difficulty in understanding and using nonverbal communication. Then the behavior, repetitive behaviors and interest. One of the autism advocates that I know talks about when somebody that doesn't have autism is really interested and hyper-focused on something, they're considered an expert. When somebody has autism and they're really interested in a topic, they're considered obsessed. It's really, how do we look at it? And then there's the behavioral and cognitive characteristics, which include some difficulties with planning, which sometimes doesn't really mean that they don't plan, but that they plan too much. And when the plans change, challenges in changing the focus. There's some anxiety and some fear of social situations. There's also the either lack of fear, which is how sometimes people with autism end up dying because they don't consider all the possible consequences of what can happen. And that is some of the other characteristics, which often there's delay in language development. The truth is as the previous speaker mentioned, we don't understand the brain. We know a lot more about the brain today than we did in the year 2000, but there's still so much about the brain that we don't know anything about. And so one of the theories is that there is so much sensory input that's coming into the brain that language and movement get delayed in the development, which is why early intervention is so important. We also know that there are higher rates of epilepsy, gastrointestinal issues, and a lot of other issues that come along with having autism. We don't really know why. And so this is what I was talking about, the spectrum. It's not linear. It could be that somebody needs lots of support in social functioning, but their cognitive functioning is really great. So somebody may identify, when you look at the behaviors, may be here with social awareness, but with their repetitive behaviors, they may be out here and they don't have them, or they may have some motor skills where they need a lot of support, but they place here with sensory processing. And so it's where somebody places in the spectrum. That's what we mean by spectrum. It's not low functioning, high functioning that most people think about. Even though in the diagnostic manual, they have autism 1, autism level 2, autism level 3, which has to do with the level of support that the person needs in order to be able to participate in society and have jobs. You can just go on YouTube and look it up. There's no one way to be autistic. It's about 3 minutes long, I think. And it's really a person with autism that is talking about their experience. One of the things we're finding out is that there's more and more people being diagnosed with autism later in life. What happens is they're able to mask. That this person talks about masking. And when I talk to advocates that have autism and that are professionals and are out, we have people that are lawyers, doctors, all sorts of professions that have autism, and some of them prefer to be called autistic. And they talk about autism being part of who they are, and being cured of that would remove who they are as a person. And so they, what they talk about is that we make them mask in jobs and in families and in family gatherings, and it's exhausting. And they go home, and they have to go home and take a nap after spending 8 hours at work trying to pretend they are not who they are. So if you have somebody that you hire, and you hire them to analyze data, one of the things that we have found, depending on where they are on the spectrum, they might be really good at...
relative at a party. You know you're autistic, right? Initially, I rejected the idea. I was 30, and my knowledge of autism was based on TV caricatures and digs from people who suggested anyone behaving poorly must be on the spectrum. I thought autistic people were math wizards who lacked empathy and loved trains. Of course, there's no one way to be autistic, and autism can present quite differently in different people. I'm a loudmouth creative with an overactive empathy chip who can barely add 2 digits together, and I couldn't care less about trains. My story is more common than you'd think. Growing up, my autistic meltdowns, a totally involuntary response to emotional or physical overload, were dismissed as attention-seeking. This was really confusing and scary as I came to believe I was somehow acting out on purpose. Add to that sensory sensitivities, making many lights, noises, smells, textures, and tastes overwhelming and painful, as well as severe aversions to almost all food, and spoiled brat was added to the charge sheet. My tendency to simply blurt out uncomfortable truths was misinterpreted by others as manipulative. It seemed that everything I did was misunderstood, and so I began to over-explain myself, a trait others found annoying. By the time I was 7, my self-esteem began to plummet. I tried to hide my difficulties and differences by disguising my obsessive interests or choosing similar ones to the other girls, like boy bands, for example. In my case, Hanson, even if I never did marry Zach. This is called masking, and it's something many autistic girls do to try to blend in. Unfortunately, the long-term effects of masking can cause mental health issues and autistic burnout, an experience lots of autistic people can relate to, where our difficulties are suddenly magnified and it becomes impossible to participate in the world. Autism is often presented as an illness to be cured, when in fact it's just a different way of experiencing the world. While it comes with its downsides, it also has benefits. Contrary to stereotypes, autistic people can be creative, emotional, and highly empathetic, kind while saying exactly what we mean. I care deeply about social justice. I connect with animals. I get untold joy from my intense interests. And when my sensory sensitivities are focused on positive experiences, like music, it can be wonderful. Around 1 in 100 people in the UK are thought to be autistic, with 3 times as many boys as girls being diagnosed. Like many areas of medical research, women are underrepresented in studies, and many of the diagnostic criteria for autism were developed with men in mind. Over the past decade, our understanding of how autism can manifest differently in girls and women, and also how our autistic behaviors can be interpreted differently, has changed. But research still has a long way to go. Until I was diagnosed as autistic, I thought I was a broken, terrible person. My diagnosis gave me a framework to explain my experience to loved ones and the wider world. Meeting other autistic people gave me permission to understand and even begin to like myself. Being autistic isn't all roses and sunshine. Like anything, it comes with its pros and cons. Some people see autism as an illness, whilst others call it a superpower. To me, it's neither. It's simply the blueprint for who I am, and to cure me of my autism would be to cure me of myself. My hope is that society comes to better understand the autistic experience, so that future generations of women are able to be diagnosed at an earlier age. That way, they can be given the support they need to thrive, have self-confidence, and relate to the world on their own terms as their unique, brilliant, autistic selves.
I'm glad it worked. So I guess my final message to all of you is be kind. Accept other people as being different. We have, in South Florida, we have multicultural community. And we accept each other for, like not everybody drinks cafecito at 3 o'clock. Some of us drink tea. Some of us drink water. And we have come to accept those differences and value those differences. It's the same thing at work. At work we have, I don't know if he's been diagnosed, I don't really care, but he shows a lot of the traits. He does our data, and he's amazing with that. Social skills, not so great. So I know that when I have to go to him and say, we have to make a change here, I know the first reaction is going to be something I don't like. I've come to know that, but I call him the Excel whisperer. He can do stuff with Excel sheets that I've never seen anybody do before. And that's what I need him to do. I don't need him to keep eye contact. I don't need him to shake my hand. So when we are employing people and hiring people in that hiring process, and we expect somebody that isn't going to have to talk to the public, do I really need him to have social skills? Probably not. Just like I wouldn't expect somebody to come in a wheelchair and be able to lift 50 pounds. I don't expect but if what they're going to do is a desk job, I don't need them to lift 50 pounds. So think about that. If your neighbor is annoying, I think Bruce said it great. If your neighbor is annoying, be kind, be patient. Think about we all relate to the world differently and we all belong. The goal is to create a world where everybody feels like they belong.
If you are in Sunrise, Florida, please visit our club. You can find the meeting times on our club website. I have a video on the history of Rotary and my personal goals in joining Rotary. What is Rotary? We have a short video that we downloaded from the Rotary International website that explains the many goals of Rotary International.